Hey guys, it's Troy with another pen mail slash pen show and tell day. And, when you look at American-made fountain pens, and you think about some of the iconic brands that are out there, then you've got, let's say Schaefer, and you've got Waterman, and you've got Esterbrook. When I first started collecting vintage fountain pens, I started with Esterbrook's because they were plentiful, they were easy to find, they were inexpensive, and they were worth investing in because I learned more about pens. The other cool thing about them is then you can change nibs out very easily, and nibs are plentiful. So if you didn't like the nib that you had, you can always change it out. Well, I've got a bunch of Esterbrook pens, and I'm not going to show you all of them, but I'm going to show you some of the different varieties that I've got. I've got the desk pen. I've got a couple of those. I've got one with a clear tip. I've got two that are in that style right there with the all black. I've got the very popular J series, the Esterbrook J, and then you've got the LJ, which is basically a smaller version of the J. Okay, and I've got these in some various colors. Unlike some folks, I mean, they collect a whole slew of them. I haven't gone that far down the Esterbrook rabbit hole, but I do have a drawer full of them. And then you've got the M2 that I managed to procure, which is actually a pretty nice fountain pen, different sort of filling system than the others. But there's one that I didn't have in my collection, and that was the dollar pen. So named because they sold for $1. And this pen is from 1939, and it was in pristine condition. The only thing that's off from it was right there, a little tiny ding on that band right there. And who knows, that may have happened since I've had it, because I've used it and carried it and had it in my pen sleeve and on my desk. So it was in excellent condition. Now this particular dollar pen, it was made for the lower end, but they're also harder to find than the J's, the LJ's that are out there. J's you can find just about anywhere. As a matter of fact, you can find them anywhere from $40 to $70, so restored, depending upon where you find them. I find them sometimes in thrift stores or in antique stores, and I managed to get them for about $10. So maybe $15 on eBay if they need a new sack, that kind of thing. So, and it was on Esterbrook's really that I practiced, along with an old Imperial, how to change ink sacks. And I've been buying them where they needed a little bit of restoration, so I learned how to polish a little bit because they were inexpensive. And I learned how to clean up pens. I learned how to tear them apart, how to change ink sacks, and that sort of thing. Now this particular one, this dollar pen, 1939, fantastic condition for its shape. I mean, for its age, it's awesome. On the finial of the cap, you've got the Esterbrook logo, and then you've got the stereotypical, or the very typical dollar pen clip. All right, then you got the single ring. You got a flat bottom here. It is a lever filler, and this particular lever filler has fantastic imprint right there. And I bought this particular pen for several reasons. Number one, the condition it was in. I could tell that it was in excellent condition, and this particular seller I trust, and they said that it was in pristine condition, near mint. So I took them at their word, and lo and behold, it was. This pen had probably never seen ink before I got it. I have not torn it open to see if it had the original sack on it, but if it did, it was still very pliable and sucked ink very easily. And it had a nib on it that I was not familiar with. And one of the cool things about Esterbrook that I really liked, and to me was innovative, is their modular, I'm going to call it modular nib. So let's take a look at this one. These renew point nibs. Basically, if you don't like the nib that's there, you unscrew it, pull it out, find one that you do like, and put it in. And they had a ton of different nibs from which to choose. So, I found some that I liked, some that I didn't like. And if I don't like it, then I either buy another one or I swap it out with one. I've got some spare nibs sitting back here in a drawer, and some of them are fine, some of them are mediums. My favorite one, I think, is on this one right here, and this is actually a broad. And they all have like a 4-digit numbering system, and I'll show you what some of these look like. But this is probably my favorite nib, and who knows, I may just take this nib out of this pen, even though I love this particular pen because of the nib, and put it in a dollar pen. I don't know. But I bought this one because it had a nib that I was not familiar with. This one had a 2048 nib, which is also called a Falcon Nib. And I did a lot of research on it, and a Falcon Nib simply means it's the shape of the nib. So in this particular case, I'll give you a close-up, a better close-up than this. But there's, if you're familiar with the Greek letter omega, it kind of has an omega that goes up and over part of the nib here. And it's also on the side, let me put it right next to an ordinary style nib. You'll notice that this one here has a little curve or a little flare to it. It flares in, then flares back out, whereas their regular nibs are just straight. Okay, so maybe you can get a good shot of that, the difference between the two. So those are the only two real differences. This pen's a little short when you take off the cap, so it's not as comfortable for me that way. Posted, it's much better, much easier to write with. It's a fairly lightweight pen. It's really no more than, I mean, or probably just a little less even than the J series, because let's compare these two. You'll notice that the J series is actually just a hair longer, just a tad bit. You see the bottom there where you got the jeweled end and the jeweled cap compared to the flat here and the flat there. So let's go ahead and I've already got it inked up, and what I chose to put in it was one of my go-to inks, especially for if I want to use a black ink in a vintage pen. I tend to use Waterman Inks, so I use the Intense Black, and I've got that in a lot of pens. This particular pen, I was very surprised for two things. Number one, it's an extra fine nib. I'm not a fan of fine and extra fine nibs. My wife picked it up. She hated it because one of the things when she was doing the ink writing, or when she was doing the sample writing of it, she really held it up. What I found on this particular pen, you really got to hold it at a much better angle. And if you go too high, it's going to be very scratchy and be like a needle point. This particular nib, you have to hold it at a decent angle here. So let's go ahead and see how she writes. And I do know that she writes better on the Rhodia paper than it does on like regular note paper, and it did okay on copy paper, which I was using quite a bit. So in Esterbrook, this is a 1939 dollar pen. This one has the 2048 Falcon Nib. Now, I heard some people, or I read behind some people, who believe that the Falcon Nib simply referred to that it was a stub. They had a fine stub nib, and it was like a 2442 or something like that, and they had just assumed that Falcon meant that it was a stub. No, from what I've read, I tend to think that Falcon just refers to the shape of the nib rather than to whether or not it's a stub. And I'll put up a graphic that should have for you just a portion off from Esterbrook.net, and I think you can go find a full list of what each nib is. So this particular nib was sold in and billed as being flexible. It's a steel nib, but from 1939 on a steel nib, look, I'm able to get a good amount of line variation out of it. Nice, thick, dark line. It's a little scratchy when you do that, though. So you gotta, if you're looking for a very smooth writer and you're looking for that nice wide line, first of all, you would never choose an extra fine nib to do it with. But the 2048 is definitely not the nib for that. But as far as gliding across the page, held at the right angle rather than up here like my wife was trying to do it when she was testing it, because she was standing up and leaning over on a notepad. If you sit down and hold it at the right angle, you got some feedback, and you write real fast, you will catch, snag the paper some. But I have been using this pen actually quite a bit this week, and like I said, I'm not a fan of extra fine, but I wanted to check out the nib because it was one that I've never had before. So, the 2048 Falcon, okay, if I want an extra fine nib for a particular purpose, I know that I can throw that in. So, alright folks, my Esterbrook dollar pen now added to my collection. I paid, more than I would for a normal J or an LJ, because these are more scarce and because of the condition that it was in. I mean, it appeared to never been inked, so that's what made me pay a little more. And I've seen, there's one seller out there that has these for over twice what I paid for this. And quite honestly, I saw this in red. I really wanted the red one, but doggone it, that particular seller sold out of the red one and only had a black one left. So I went ahead and picked the black one. And it was the last one that they had in stock. So I just wanted something a little bit different. So if you're into vintage fountain pens, consider Esterbrook's. Consider the Esterbrook dollar pen. I'll try to put a link to some of my previous videos that I've done with Esterbrook pens. So, but I'm always happy to add some cool old Americana quality pens, even though it was a low-end market for a fountain pen. But 1930s, 1940s, up through the 50s, I still love vintage Esterbrook's.